something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Hi, welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I have to tell you that I love having this out in front of me all the time, thinking about my podcast and thinking about the reason I called it that was because that's what I want to be about. This weekend and days that go by, I sat in the sunset last night and just thought how grateful I am for one more day. One more day in my life to lift myself and to lift others, to teach and to be about love and oneness and helping us all walk down that path. I saw another social media post this morning that talked about their father and the incredible impact he left, and that's surely one of the greatest impacts we can leave on this world is through the lives of our children. And so just thank you for being with me on this journey as we do that. You know, several weeks ago, we did a podcast on the emotion code. Thus, enter the book, The Emotion Code. And it was so well received. It was one of the things that people have requested time and time again. I need to know about why is it these things that happened to me when I was 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 are still affecting me and that I'm still having trauma from. And I'm 50 years old. When am I ever going to be rid of these things? And how do I get in touch with them? And how do I handle that in my life? The residual effects of childhood trauma, or maybe not, we didn't think we went through trauma. Like, I don't think I went through trauma, like trauma we think of as sexual abuse, or was in a home that was poor and didn't have anything to eat. And I had a kind of a fairly normal childhood growing up in Midwest Iowa. And yet, I know I have scars of not being enough from those childhood years. And so now this week I turned 69 to still be in check with those things. So when I posted the podcast about the emotion code, I had my dear friend, Roberta Hughes, who was on with me before about a whole different topic, reach out and said, I love that. I feel like I use that every day. And so I said, hey, how about doing a second episode on the emotion code? So Roberta, welcome this morning and thank you for joining me.
Yes, Mary. So when I got your message, because I remember commenting on your post, and it really just was me sharing, like, this is something that I have been practicing for so many years. And then it was a couple of weeks later that you messaged me and said, hey, would you like to talk about this? And I was thrilled because I know that my experience is unique and each one of us has a unique experience. And before I even knew what the emotion code was, I feel like I was using these practices through my yoga practice, through my Pilates practice, through my meditation practice. So the way that he articulates everything in this book just really speaks to my brain and my heart and things that I've seen be helpful for me and my clients over the years.
So I kind of only became familiar with the emotion code about 4 to 5 years ago. And when I ordered the book on Amazon and I got the book, I was dumbfounded that the book was written in 2007. Yeah. I was like, well, where have I been for the last 15 years that I hadn't known about this book and I hadn't been applying its principles in my life and using it to help me with dealing with some of these scars that are still with me and affect my fight and flight responses that are in the back of my brain, because those scars are the ones that rule that area. And they allow me to, yes, be safe, but they also create havoc in my daily life if I'm not aware of them. And so let's start with that, about how you became aware of this and how you began practicing it in your own life, which was just a continuation of what you were already doing.
Yeah, so I became aware of the emotion code really through my very first yoga training in 2002. So this was before the book existed. And I learned more about the
Right.
Chinese meridian theory, which he discusses in his book as part of the process that our subconscious mind goes through in terms of how we hold on to emotions that we may not even know are there, and how those emotions are stored in the body throughout the connective tissue. And in yin yoga, we work with that connective tissue to help tug on it, to help hydrate it, to
Hmm.
help move energy that is stagnant so that people can begin to feel and process and work through difficult emotions.
Okay, so that for me is an interesting piece when you talk about those memories, those experiences, especially traumatic experiences
Mhm,
that are still stored in the tissues of our body.
mhm.
Long, long ago, long before 2005, I read a book called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And at the time, I didn't understand it as much because this was way back in the 90s. I didn't understand how that was possible to still have those memories. And yet, the more I dwelt on it and realized that I'd stuffed all those old feelings so deep that there was no way for them to release, rather than looking at them and accepting them and handling and loving them and caring for them to be released, I just pushed them down and pushed them away. And that's not part of who I am anymore. I'm a new person. I'm not that person,
Right.
but they're still there. Share with my listeners a little bit about the physiological process of how that happens in our bodies.
Well, in the book, The Emotion Code, he says many times over again that thoughts become things, and thoughts are made of energy, and that energy needs to either move or it gets stuck. So if we think something and we have a feeling about it, but that feeling does not get expressed or processed, it stays in the body and it finds a home. And if you read the book, he talks about how the organ system of our body harbors different emotions. So the liver tends to harbor anger, the kidneys, fear, the heart and lungs, grief. So when these emotions go unexpressed, they harbor in the body in a place that may not be directly in that organ itself, but through the connective tissue, through the meridian system of the body, every piece of us links up to one of these major organ systems. So if you, for example, get into a yoga pose that is putting pressure and hitting an acupressure point that links up to the liver, and you start feeling frustrated, agitated, angry, restless, this could be a sign that you have some stored emotions there that need to be expressed, that need to be worked through.
So, when you talk about fear being stored in the kidneys, I didn't ever have kidney disease, but I suffered from a lot of UTIs and bladder and kidney infections for decades. And I didn't ever associate that with fear.
The kidney and the urinary bladder are intimately connected. So, when we apply different types of acupressure or pressure points, or as he would use a magnet to release it, if it's not in the kidneys, it could be more in the urinary bladder or even the reproductive system.
It's crazy because as the years have gone on, and I suffered from these really up until about the last 5 years, and then suddenly they kind of have like just stopped coming. And silly me, I'm thinking, oh, well, whatever it is, I'm eating the right thing, which probably had something to do with it, or whatever it is, my body no longer needs to be, storing those infections. I didn't relate that until just now with my process that I've personally been going through of releasing fear.
Mm. Yeah, I was almost going to ask you the question 5 years ago, what transformed for you? What transitioned for you on a personal and emotional level?
Hmm. This process started when I was about 50, but certainly into my 60s, even though I began to recognize my fears and to release them, it really wasn't until about 5 years ago that I really felt the flushing of just like, I don't have to live there anymore. And instead of keeping everyone out here so they didn't see how afraid I was, I began to open up and let people in and see those fears and like realize then what? We're all alike.
Yes.
And that I'm not the only one.
No.
And to let go of being the imposter syndrome. And now when I feel, it's not that I don't feel fear anymore, Roberta. It's now more like when I do, I recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than stuffing it, I can say, whoa, what are you afraid of today? What is that bringing up in you? What past thing? And then able to say, that was this feeling. And yeah, that's not who you are now. And you can let that go.
Yeah.
And that began in earnest for me on a daily level about 5 years ago. Seriously.
Yeah. And what you're describing is the impermanence of things if we allow them to travel through their normal lifespan. So an emotion is going to show up. You can either cut it off, stuff it down, pretend it's not there, or you can just let it go through you and you can experience it and feel it. And then it moves on and it becomes an impermanent experience. When we stuff, when we push away, when we hold on to anything, it gets stuck. And then the energy of that gets stuck in the body. And it can manifest as stagnation, where the energy is no longer flowing in a healthy way. And that links up to the health and wellness of the whole body.
You know, I had never thought about this before. This might be too intimate to share here on this podcast, but I'm going to do it anyways because it just has to do with urination. But about it, this, I'm just finally putting this all together in my brain, like right here, live. Okay, that about 5 years ago, after I would urinate, I would think I was done, and then I would sit there for just a second and ask myself, "Do you have anything more to release?" And then I would like urinate a whole bunch more. And that now it's like just part of my routine. Every day I'm just sit there and I'm like, okay, I'm done. Wait. And I would ask myself. And then I thought my bladder was empty, but no, there's more. And so I just let it out. That's kind of crazy, but it's like a real thing for me.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of anything like that?
I have not heard of anything like that specifically, but what you're describing is the patience and curiosity of listening to your body. So maybe your brain thinks, okay, I'm finished, and you're ready to go on to the next thing, but you're actually pausing and asking, is there more?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
for some reason there still is, but that could explain why some people will go use the restroom, go back to work, and then 5 minutes later they have to go again because they didn't give themselves that time. They didn't.
The time. You know, it's my kidney doctor, because I used to have kidney stones a lot as well. On my last checkup, I was explaining this to him, and he said, "Thank you. Thank you for doing that and having the patience. So many people don't." And he goes, "I can't tell you how many patients I do consult to do that." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell me that?" Because doctors don't know how to describe it in that modality. They don't know how to say, and then give yourself a moment and ask, do you have anything more to release? Doctors don't know how to do that unless you share with them the experience, and then they go, good for you.
Yeah, or that's interesting. And then they kind of plug that away
Yeah.
as information. So the more people
Yeah.
share, they'll start to see patterns. And from those patterns, that's when a Western doctor becomes curious about doing some research and looking deeper. Like, okay, I've heard this testimonial a number of times. Let me look deeper and see what that connection might be.
And my daughter, who was diagnosed with MS about, maybe 8 years ago. And at the time of her diagnosis, well, actually into that diagnosis, about 3 years, she had 23 lesions in her brain. And so she began to realize that Western medicine was not helping and the lesions were continuing to increase. So then she decided to discover other modalities, modalities now that are so much a part of her life, that she started her own healing company. And she just went to the doctor this summer, and the number of lesions in her brain has dropped to 9.
Wow.
He was dumbfounded. I mean, he's the, renowned MS doctor in the state. He goes, I have never seen this. What are you doing to reduce, not just stabilize and maintain, but to reduce the number of lesions in your brain? And when she told him, he was like, huh. He wasn't quite sure he believed her, but you could see he was storing that information away.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're at your wit's end with Western medicine, that perhaps there are other healing options available to us in our mind and in our heart, in our body.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's room for both.
Oh, yeah.
The integrity that Western medicine has to give us a diagnosis, to really look and test and figure out, okay, what is it that we're dealing with here? From there, you can do quite a bit with Western medicine therapies, but even right now in the cancer research world, so many people are looking at alternative medicine to support their journey through cancer treatments or to move away from them altogether. So sometimes going through a course of Western medicine and then going through a course of alternative medicine. And oftentimes the two work very well together. Some people find that one pathway works better than the other. So our bodies are unique and our bodies heal in different ways. And to have many resources and tools that you're open to, and that's one of the things brought up in the emotion code, is being willing and being open and believing. So your belief that this is going to heal you, that this is going to help you, that this is going to transform how you're feeling, that belief is the beginning of it becoming true.
Absolutely. If you think that it's a bunch of hocus pocus and you're sticking with the tried and true scientific facts, there's no way.
Yes.
But if you're open to all healing from the universe, so much is available to you.
Mm-hmm.
Roberta, one of the questions I've had from my listeners about the emotion code is they're not quite sure how to use it in their own bodies, in their own selves, by themselves. So where do you suggest that people start in dissecting this emotion code within?
Yeah, I think the best place to begin is with the sway test that he talks about in the very beginning of the book. And then he brings it up again in the middle of the book before he starts talking about muscle testing and the diagnostic process. Even for me as a practitioner, that diagnostic process feels very intricate. There's a lot to know. There's a lot of subtlety involved, especially when you're working with the energetic body. So people who work with energy have been trained over years and years to feel that energy, to experience it. So, if you've read the book and you're curious and excited, I would say to start doing things to get to know the energy within your own body. So the sway test, being able to clear
Explain that to people so they understand that.
So the sway test, as he describes it, is our bodies move towards things that are positive and they move away from things that are negative. So to perform the sway test and to begin this experience of becoming comfortable with understanding how that energy moves forward or back, you quiet your mind, you let go of thoughts. And that part is super important because if you're cluttering your mind with judgment and preconceived ideas before you do this, those are going to cloud your ability to discern, or your subconscious mind's ability to discern what's true and what's not. So beginning with something basic and saying, my name is Roberta, and feeling the body sway forward because that's a true statement. And then saying something that is not true. My name is Mary. My body would tend to sway backwards. So beginning that simplistic of Maybe you pick up an orange and you say, I'm holding an orange, your body should sway forward. If you say, I'm holding an apple, it should sway back. So keep it very practical rather than trying to dive in right away. And I think one mistake people make is in that self-diagnostic process is that they already imagine that they know what's happening and what the truth is. So if you bring that judgment to trying to discern and trying to figure out what is true and what is not true, you're probably not going to get a valid reading. So you have to be able to clear your mind to let go of your opinions and
Yeah.
to really ask those questions in a way that someone who has no idea about you might ask them. Non-objective, right?
One of the things that I love about this is that the concept, first of all, of the need to quiet the mind, just like if you were going into meditation,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a form of meditation where we allow our inner soul, that peace that I believe exists inside of us, that's stored in our tissues, to speak and to give them voice and to listen. And it is possible, those who have never actually tried this or moved into that space sometimes are very scoff, oh, that's ridiculous, you know what I mean? But once you've achieved that state, you know it. And to
Mm-hmm.
keep working on that state until you feel that all prejudices are released from your mind and that you personally are just open to the information that's going to be presented to you,
Yeah.
free from judgment.
And
Yeah.
that's easier said than done. And for me, as I said, that's where the yin yoga practice has really become this foundation for me of how the emotion code works. Because in the yin yoga practice, we are settling into stillness. We're becoming the
Ah,
observer rather than the judger. And to observe where emotions show up in the body, where pain shows up in the body, and then to become curious about it rather than, oh, this must mean that, or I don't like the way that feels, so I'm going to back away. I'm
mhm.
not going to quite dive in and investigate. Um, Learning how to be with discomfort in a way that is non judgmental and has pure awareness is a skill to cultivate. And then if you're practicing the sway test and you are skeptical, maybe that's your question to yourself or your statement, I am skeptical. If your body sways forward, maybe you need to work on letting go of that skepticism before you try to make this a practice that's going to be healing
Mm.
for you and help you understand where these stuck energies are in your body.
So isn't that kind of a thing that we are like so guilty of every day that we want to jump ahead? We have no patience.
Yes.
We want to like get to the end. Okay, I don't want to do that. Let me get back to this other part here in this part, and let's read about that. I don't want to do the sway test because it didn't work for me, and
Right.
but just to stay in that space,
Yes.
sometimes for days or weeks of letting all that. If you've not done this before in this space, it may take a while to find that space where you are free from judgment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are judging beings. We make something out of everything, and it happens automatically. So until you become aware of what those stories are in your brain, you really can't change your relationship to them. They're going to be there and running the show, no matter how much you think that they're not.
I love that. Running the show, right?
Yeah.
How many of you out there have ever felt like that? That something else was running your show rather than your authentic self, but you didn't know how to break away from that? That those emotions that you experienced long ago or even last week are running the show. It doesn't allow for us to find peace,
Mm.
which for me is one of the greatest gifts of growing older,
Yeah.
is finding that peace. And you, at your age, much younger, still, you look at where you are in finding that peace. It's not an age issue. You don't have to wait till you're old to find peace. it's something that can be yours right now. You're living proof of that. I mean, just look at you. Even to look at your face, right, listeners? If you're not watching on YouTube or video, if you're just listening, let me just tell you, her face just speaks of peace. You have the most beautiful, calm, peaceful face.
Thank you. I just want to share a funny story. Not a funny story, but it really is my nature. And I just competed in this competition to become a HotWorks virtual instructor. And I made it to the top 15 out of 200
Yes,
candidates.
yes. I watched all of it on social media.
And I was so outside of my comfort zone. Like my excitement is still on a lower level than someone else's excitement. That's just my nature over the years. And at the end of the competition, I didn't make the top 7, but they pulled me aside and they said, you are just so peaceful. And we have another brand that we're working on. And we think you would be a perfect fit for this. And I couldn't have agreed more. So although I brought my authentic self and I have no regrets of how I did in the
Yeah.
competition, I wasn't the right fit for what they were looking for this particular thing. But by being my authentic self, I planted a seed that maybe when they open this new line of
Yeah.
business, that I will be a right fit. So rather than trying to show up and cookie cutter myself to what I thought they wanted, I really just brought my authenticity, and I'm so proud of how the experience went.
Yeah, I loved watching all of your pictures on social media, but it is that thing we sometimes try to do. We've got a round hole and a square peg, and we are going to get it in there, even if we damage this piece in the process. And you didn't. You went, that's not fitting. I think I'll step aside. I'll look for the right spot
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And when you find it, it will just slip right in,
Yeah.
sweetheart. You have so much to share with this universe.
Thank you.
So after going through the sway test, what do you see as people's next step in learning about these trapped emotions that are in the body?
Yeah. So, with the sway test, maybe you discover that you have fear or that you have anger. From there, I still don't feel that I have the skill to just take a magnet and have an emotion leave me. So I would look for a skilled person to do that part. And that's just me. Maybe you feel comfortable doing that on your own body and you feel 100% capable. I tend to put capability in the hands of people that I trust when I'm trying to release things that are difficult. Because I feel like we can only do so much on our own, and the rest happens through community and relationships. So if there is fear, trying to release that all by yourself could be a scary experience. It could bring up emotions that you're unaware that are even stored in there. And to be able to do that in relationship with someone else, in my opinion, is a healthier way than to try to do it all by yourself. That being said, when you become more connected to the things that you're holding on to, for me, that's a place to start a line of curiosity, a line of questioning. Like you asked yourself, is there more? What could this be? Where could it have started? And then through practices like meditation, yin yoga, you can journal, you can take walks in nature. Be curious about what is this, and think back to where it might have started showing up in your life and how did it get stuck. Let the whole story unfold without judgment, and then you're more willing and able to let it go and for that change to occur.
I think back that is something that's been so profound for me as I've gone through this. When I really just quiet my mind and I am in that space of wanting to understand an emotion that is so strong inside of me. And suddenly a memory will come to me that I haven't thought of forever. But when I think on it, I do remember it. I do remember the fear, and I remember it being the same. And it's an amazing experience when you actually get to that point and you feel your body teaching you.
Yeah.
not you teaching your body. Because that's how most of us view this life, is that we're here to teach and train and discipline this body of ours,
Yes.
rather than letting all of that go and allowing our body, our mind, the tissues of our heart and different organs to teach us.
Yeah.
That's a
I
beautiful place.
find, and I say this to many of my clients, that most practices in our Western culture are about doing things to ourselves, do this, do that, do
Mm.
this, and your body will do this or that. But if you are not vulnerable with your emotional response to things, no matter how many things you do to yourself, if you're not doing it for yourself and have an understanding of what that means, change will likely not occur, or the change that occurs will not be what you were hoping for. For example, when I was at my heaviest in life, I was working in a big box gym. I was working out with a male trainer. I was eating all the protein. I was doing all the workouts. And I didn't like how my body felt, but I was doing all of these things, following all the rules. And that just wasn't resonating with how my body functions and how it feels and how it stays healthy and feeling good. So once I started listening to what my body truly needs to have balance and harmony and rhythm, I don't really have to do anything to myself to maintain my weight or to maintain my level of fitness or to maintain my emotional connection to relationships and to myself.
How do I find someone that would be skilled in this? Um, is it something I just search on the internet, Google emotional code help, or how can people find someone that is skilled in this to help them move through this process?
Yeah, I've never actually Googled the
Well, I
emotion
haven't either, but
code.
I'm just thinking if I'm
So
listening, I
that would
might be
be some
Googling.
That's the answer to everything anymore is
Yeah.
Google, emotion code therapists. And I bet you could find people who list themselves as that. I
And do you want,
personally don't list myself as that because I feel like I haven't been certified in this. I wouldn't consider myself an expert, although
ah,
I can definitely help a person let go of their skepticism and start learning about how things feel in their body, how that emotion shows up in their body to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable. I believe that's a big
mm,
foundation of being able to work with a therapist to let things go. He described some pretty miraculous stories where it was so instant that it happened, but I imagine a lot of these patients had been patients for periods of time where they had that relationship, they had that trust, they had that willingness for him to help them let it go in that
mm.
moment. To come to that place all on our own, I think we would all be a Buddha at this point in life. We would be Jesus, right?
We
we
fall a little short, yeah.
we would be enlightened beings if we could just easily let go of the things that are weighing us down and holding us back.
Because if it was
So
easy, we'd have done it long ago.
exactly. Yes. You wouldn't
Yeah.
have waited until you
Yeah.
were 50 or 60 or 70 years
Yeah.
old, right? You
Right.
would just let it go and move on from it. So to
And
begin,
hopefully, as we move down this plateau, or this, I want to say it's more like a platform of healing ourselves, that the whole world becomes more conscious, more lifted, and there will come a time when we can do this for ourselves and it will be a natural movement for us. But the planet as a whole is not there yet. And so having a mentor to help you through this, someone who has skilled, I think is really vital in this process at this point in time.
yes. And so I think for someone who's beginning, the beginning phase is number one to acknowledge I've been feeling this way and the things that I'm trying have not helped me. So
Mm.
how can I get things to transition, to transform, to change? And to be in that place of willingness first would be step one. And then maybe read the emotion code if you haven't already. He has so many stories in here. Some of them may increase a person's skepticism because there are so many stories that
Yeah.
it's like, really? Could that be true? So it may heighten your inner skeptic, and that's okay because anytime we have an emotional reaction to something, it means that we have felt something, and it will make us become more curious to learn more. So read the
Mm.
book, see what your initial feeling and thought is, and then start to become curious. Google people who work with the emotion code, people who work with energy. So as he said, energy is not new. It's been around for thousands of years through the Chinese meridian theory. This is where acupuncture is founded. The whole process of
Right.
acupuncture is around the Chinese meridian theory. Seek out an acupuncturist because they're very skilled in energy. There are Reiki healers who work with energy. So if you Google energy workers, I know this, you will get so many different types of energy therapists. And I always encourage people to go with where you're drawn. You're drawn in that direction for a reason, and then have a
Yeah.
conversation with that person. If it doesn't resonate with you, choose another. I always say when you're looking for a skilled therapist to mentor you in any way, whether it be with energy work or a modality that you're trying to learn, that relationship of trust needs to be strong. So at least interview
Yeah.
3 people right off the bat. Even if that very first person you talk to, you're like, I know this is the right person,
Hmm.
interview a couple more and then really consider how you felt in those conversations and where that energy feels pulled. So again, you're going to move towards the thing that is the best for you in that moment.
And to listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
This is
too
not.
often people go in with this idea of, I need to change this. And it's more of a place of desperation because they've been in pain so long, they've been ill so long. They're just hoping to make it better. But if you're having that resistance right off the bat that this isn't the right person or the right thing, and to keep going forward just from that place of, I desperately need to change this, it's not going to be helpful in the long run.
Mm. Do you feel like that this is something that you need a local person to help you with, or is this something that can be done on a call or on a Zoom, or um, do people need to be present one-on-one for this? What is the best way to do that?
This question is kind of controversial at this moment in time because energy is definitely more felt person to person in human connection.
Mm.
However, there is a way to begin in a relationship like what we're having here on this podcast. You know, I can feel who you are, but that's because
Mm.
I've had conversations with you. I've been following you on social media. So I have a little bit of an idea. If I were to see you in person, that energy would be amplified even more. Um,
Right.
so I think it can start as a Zoom phone call, a Zoom conversation. You're going to have initial thoughts and feelings from that experience. If you're drawn forward, then maybe you could travel to meet this person in person at some point in time. But when that relationship of trust exists, whether it's through a screen or person to person, that's going to be the foundation of it being effective.
Mm. I like that. I like that a lot. We have to begin the process of exploration.
Yeah.
Is this something that you would recommend for people who are dealing and suffering with emotional trauma that's maybe coming out physically? Or if people really aren't aware of any emotional trauma or fears or anger that they're dealing with, but they have a problem within their body, how do you discern when this is applicable and when it's not? Like, let me give you an example.
Sure.
There's a personal example.
Okay.
So Ever since I went to Ukraine and I was stuck in those vans for 9 hours at a time, just with my legs up like this, when I got back, I could not get rid of the swelling and inflammation in my left knee. And so I've been thinking this whole time, I've been eating an anti-inflammatory diet. Yes, the closer I stick to it, the more that it helps. And then I thought, well, I need from my doctor some anti-inflammatory drugs. And so I've been taking those. It's getting worse. And thinking about this podcast today, I just thought, huh, why didn't I think about that emotion code for my knee?
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you know when the emotion code comes into play to what I thought was just a physical ailment of, you know, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, so you had both a physical and an emotional experience. Just the
Ah,
physicalness of sitting, tightly bound was one part of it. But think of the emotions that were with you in those moments of being in the van. W- what are you holding on to from that experience that could still be in the physical body?
wow. I just, in the van so many times, I just had an overwhelming sense of sadness.
Mm.
And why is our planet doing this? How can we be one when this is how we treat each other? And then there was a sense of not being able to help enough. So I guess I would interpret that as my not being enough. There was a time when I had to come home and there was so much yet to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I would encourage you to kind of look at the meridian system of the body and look at where that inflammation and pain is at strongest, because there are lots of meridians that run around the knee that link up to the heart and the lungs, the kidneys, the stomach and spleen. And in his book, he kind of charts where emotions are connected to our vital organs. And then if you look at the meridian system, doing a session for the stomach and spleen, for example, might help you let those emotions become expressed and released. Um, or you could seek out a practitioner. I don't know if you're working with an emotion code practitioner in your area already.
This is something that I've been doing myself,
Okay.
but I definitely have been asking. And the other woman that I had on definitely does emotion code sessions
Hmm.
and is a certified handler of the emotion code. And I've been thinking maybe I do need some private one-on-one sessions with that.
Yeah.
My son-in-law has his certification in emotion code.
Mm.
I thought, well, maybe that's what. But I'm at that point, Roberta, where I definitely think I need to reach out. I need to ask for help with this.
Yeah. And I would love to give you a yin yoga series. So, when we get offline, I can ask a few
Yes.
questions and get a little more understanding about this pain and inflammation. And then I would love to send you a yin yoga series and have you practice that and see, does it create any relief for you?
Ah, yes. Thank you. I I need that. Thank you. And so when people want to reach out to you personally about using the emotion code or following you and your practices, how do we find you, Roberta?
So on my website, it's peacefulliving.com, and it's full with two L's. Also on social media, I'm on Instagram as Roberta underscore peaceful living. People can always direct message me there, ask a question. I do Wellness Wednesday segments, so oftentimes those
Yeah.
segments are inspired by questions I have received from people through direct messages. Because I truly believe if you have the question, there are thousands of others out there with that same question.
Yeah.
So I'll address things like that there. And people can set up a discovery call with me where we would have a 30-minute conversation on Zoom. and really just talk about what's going on in their physical and emotional body and the things that I might be able to offer to help.
I love that people can just, set up a call with you or follow you. And your Wednesdays are amazing. Just, I feel more peaceful just following you on social media.
Well, thank
Because
you.
there's so much craziness out there. I'm sorry if I see another dancing video, I'm going to like scream. And there's crazy stuff out there. I try and only follow those people that just fill me with peace and love and oneness. And you're definitely one of them, Roberta.
Well, thank you. And I work really hard at that because I too, I'm like, I'm not going to dance in a reel because that's not who I am. And trying to create content that's connected to who I am and what I offer and that also adds value to other people's lives is the foundation of how I bring myself to social media. So
Thank you. Thank you for being who you are and for sharing with us today on this podcast about ways that we come to healing, come to peace. When I talk about oneness, people sometimes think that I'm talking about oneness with our planet and people. But the step one of oneness is coming to one with yourself. And that's where I love to begin. And I love having you along on my journey.
thank you.
Thanks for being with us today on Crafting a Meaningful Life. And until next time, fill your life with joy, love, and oneness. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Mary.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.